But the left said the travel ban was unconstitutional. Was Donald Trump really vindicated today by the United States Supreme Court? You've heard my opinion on it. I want to get Frank Gaffney's take on this. He is the founder and president of the Center for Security Policy and a great friend of the show. Frank, welcome back.
Lars, it's wonderful to be with you.
So is the president truly vindicated by the Supreme Court's decision today?
Well, not having heard what you said, I'm going to get out on a limb and say I think very largely he was, most especially on the principle that both by virtue of statutory authority and constitutional principle, he has the ability to, and the responsibility indeed, to protect the people of this country against foreigners who wish to come here to do them harm. And that is a pretty exclusive responsibility, a pretty all-encompassing authority. And I think they got that right. And more to the point, I think they also have set the stage for something else that's important, that in exercising that right, in exercising that authority, Lars, he has the ability, as we've argued in an amicus brief that was filed with the Supreme Court in connection with this case, a number of my fellow national security practitioners, notably Andy McCarthy, now with Fox News, and Admiral Ace Lyons, and General Jerry Boykin, and a number of others, and our Center for Security Policy, we argue that the principle that the president can use means of differentiating people who we welcome here from people we do not want to admit should include, among other things, as we did in the past, Nazism and communism. In our own time, the practice of what I think is best described, as Andy McCarthy has called it, as Sharia supremacism. This is an important opportunity for the president, I think, to go forward on the basis of now this important ruling.
Well, and Frank, I think the liberals have given us a tremendous political advantage on this because people like you have been reminding folks for a long time, well more than a decade, that Sharia law is antithetical to an American pluralistic representative form of government. Because in Sharia law, the point of view of women means nothing. The rights of people who have different sexual practices mean nothing. And in fact, they're subject to either execution or stoning or whatever. In other countries, we don't allow that here. And if some future president wants to say, we can't let a group come into this country that believes in these things, I think the president would be supported by the liberals or objected to at their peril. Because if they start telling America, we should let everybody in, even if they believe that women have no rights, even if they believe that gays have no rights, etc., that's going to be politically untenable for them. They don't seem to get that, though, do they?
Well, not so as you notice. Let me give you a specific example, Lars. A friend of mine has been mounting a marvelous campaign to try to call attention to a phenomenon that is widely associated with Sharia, not exclusively, but substantially around the world, known as female genital mutilation.
Yep, we've talked about it a lot on the show. Yep.
Yeah, and what she's pointed out, this is a woman by the name of Elizabeth Yore, an international human rights activist who's been taking on this End FGM Today campaign. The Centers for Disease Control, Lars, estimate that there are 513,000 women and girls in America who have either already been subjected to this female genital mutilation or who will be. And she's raising the point that this is an example of the kind of thing you don't want to introduce into your society. And you're absolutely right. Liberals, for heaven's sakes, feminists most especially, should be standing shoulder to shoulder with everybody else saying this is not going to happen in America. In fact, it's illegal in America, but there is a widespread belief that it's being ignored, it's being practiced in our country, and it has to stop. And I'm so glad that you've called attention to this. This is one reason why I believe you don't want to be importing more of these Sharia supremacists, jihadists among them.
Well, and I guess it also blows a hole in their argument that the liberals were constantly saying, I mean, all the way through this last year, the president has acted illegally. And now I guess they've been, pushed back. But here's the other piece of that, Frank, that I want you to sound off on. We had 4 members of the Supreme Court who said no to that. So, in other words, the 4 reliably liberal members of the court, soon we hope there will only be 3 or 2, depending on how many appointments Trump gets in his 2 terms, that I'm confident he'll get. But they apparently thought that the president had no authority to do what he did, even though that the McCarran Act from the 50s says very clearly he has it. The Constitution says he has it. And yet these 4 members of the court, I think, voted a political vote rather than a vote based on the law and the Constitution.
Yeah, I'm not a legal scholar, and I certainly couldn't cite chapter and verse on this, but it's certainly been my impression, Lars, over the years, watching the liberals on this court, that that's their default setting. That's how they rule, is on the basis of politics, not on constitutional principles. Indeed, that's been the dividing line, hasn't it, for a long time between the strict constructionists of the Constitution and those who believe it's a living document and we can make it be whatever we think it needs to be in our time. And that is a formula for allowing, among other things, in this case, submission to this Sharia program in the name of not wanting to give offense or accommodations or otherwise trying to be aligned with people who, as you said at the outset of this conversation, have as their God-directed or Allah-directed goal transforming, Barack Obama called it fundamentally transforming the United States into a Sharia-adherent nation. It sounds incredible. It sounds impossible. And yet, I'm literally, as we speak, I'm watching a film about what is happening in Europe at the moment. And it is happening. It can happen. And the effects can be profound and very, very rapid.
Well, and Frank, consider this, and tell me if I'm off base here. But if they believe the Constitution is a living document, it's to be molded as the winds of social change happen. Well, most of the social changes have been things the liberals like. They say we want gay marriage, so we found that in the Constitution. We wanted this, we want abortion, we found that right in the Constitution. Yeah. What is going to happen when you get a large enough Muslim population in this country, and let's say they are all adherents to Sharia, and not some more milder form of Islam. And they say, hey, we're a substantial part of the population, and we believe that this is what we have a right to do. You say it's a living document. The danger of a living document is it can go, or a moldable, malleable document, is that it can go to support Sharia. You can say, well, looks like under the Constitution, your religious beliefs call for your daughters to be mutilated, so we're going to have to let you do it. Isn't that a danger with a silly putty Constitution?
It certainly seems to be to me. Article 6 of the Constitution, of course, says it is the supreme law of the land. That is supposed to be the protection against the idea that somebody's just going to bring in their own laws and start saying, well, this is going to govern our community. And oh, by the way, we think it ought to govern yours, too. We'll get around to you later. But for the moment, we'll settle for just having it govern our, well, they call them in Europe no-go zones. This is how it unravels. And I think that leftists, whether they're on the bench, or whether they're in academia, or whether they're in the media or elsewhere, who are insisting that this kind of behavior must be accommodated.
No, it cannot be. Frank Gaffney from the Center for Security Policy.